Welcome to The Blast Zone, the podcast where we dig up the bombs that shook Hollywood and try to find out why they went up in flames. This week, everything that happens in this movie was actually foretold by L. Ron Hubbard. This is The Mummy. Welcome to The Blast Zone.
Welcome to The Blast Zone.
We are not a podcast about bad movies. We are a podcast about movies that did badly.
That's right.
I am Jon Drake, in-house film critic of my Letterboxd account.
And I'm Ian Dukes. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings, and some of them are about movies.
Movies like The Mummy, which we'll be getting into. But before we do, we got a special guest for you guys. Again. 2 weeks in a row.
Back to back.
We had Ron on last week, and it's Ron again. No, I'm kidding. It's
It is Ron.
We announced it at the end of last week's episode, so it's not that big of a surprise. But you guys know her from Death and Friends.
You do.
Tomorrow Today.
Yep.
Talk Chef, if you're a long-time listener. And she's obviously a frequent guest on Blast Zone. She's like the third Blastateer. It's Nash Flynn.
Yay.
Hi, Nash.
Hi. Thank you for having me back. I missed you guys. It's been like a year or something.
It's been a little too long.
Yeah, I mean, we took a long break ourselves. We didn't put out anything for 4 months.
So don't feel bad.
That made it a longer wait.
It's not you. It's us.
Typically, it would not be this long in between Nashes.
I don't feel bad now. It's only been 8 months in the world then.
That's right.
Exactly. And 8 months is
It's nothing.
basically 2 weeks
In podcasting time.
Pod
in
time.
the grand scheme of things. Nash, how are you doing this week?
I'm good. Everyone in my household is sick, so that's fun.
Oh,
I
no.
got back from a Hawaiian vacation.
Yeah.
Back is Boston, so it's trash, essentially.
The Hawaii of the Northeast, as they say.
Yeah, that's what they call Boston. Thank God for that Gulf Stream.
Yeah, everyone in my house was sick, but we're all slowly recovering. So I've been there. I feel your pain. It's no fun at all. Fuck the winter.
Yeah.
I'm so sick of flu
pretty
season
brutal.
and colds and...
It's nasty.
Shut the fuck up, Ian. You live in California.
What? It's still nasty. I feel nastiness on your behalf. But I got sick too, and it was awful. So
Yeah, it does get cold there. Like high 50s sometimes. That's pretty brutal. I don't know how you survive.
we're back in the dead of winter right now, man. It's going down to 48 tonight. Bundle up.
Jeez Louise.
Oof.
All right, yeah, be safe. Hope you have
Yeah.
kindling just in case.
That's actually Boston's temperature right now. So
Yeah.
thoughts and prayers, my guy.
Okay.
It's colder in Hartford. It's 41 and windy.
Damn.
Yeah.
Tough all around, you guys.
Yeah. Ian, what about you? Buddy?
Yeah.
What's going on?
I had some good news. I got to spend some quality time with dear friends the other night, which was wonderful. And I took that occasion to try this stuff that they have out now called alcohol. And let me tell you, it's pretty fun. I had a good time. And then if you keep going, it destroys your mind and your body. So I think I have mixed feelings about the whole experience, about the alcohol part of it. I had a lovely time seeing my boys.
This is like an after school special.
Yeah.
Are we talking beers or were you doing the hard liquor route?
Started with a couple beers and a gin and tonic, and then a big glass of whiskey.
Oh, boy.
That's all I can remember.
Beer before liquor. You've never been sicker.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
literally in the
come on.
saying.
I should have known. It was foretold.
It was foretold, just like the events of this movie.
Curse of the Mummy.
The prophecy.
And you've made it no secret that you've been kind of homebound throughout all of COVID. So I imagine you weren't getting out to the tavern too often to imbibe.
No, I really wasn't. The tolerance goes down.
It does.
Years go by and your body's tolerance for anything goes down. So it's like a snowball effect.
Including malarkey. Got no tolerance for that shit.
Never did.
Never did, never will. So before we start talking about The Mummy, which I know Nash is going to have some exciting
I have
thoughts
so many
about, because we just did
She
a
got thoughts.
Death and Friends episode about Egypt, and,
Yeah, we
and
did.
you know
Oh,
that
that's so-
Nash has some valuable insight into
So many thoughts.
how historically accurate this movie may or may not be. But before we get into that, Ian, what did you watch this week that you wanted to share with the listeners?
The 2024 Oscars, as of this taping, were several weeks ago already, but I'm trying to stretch out my half-hearted Best Picture nominee theme. I watched American Fiction, which was one of last year's nominees. Really good movies, written and directed by Cord Jefferson. It's got some really fun actors in it, really cool people like Jeffrey Wright, Sterling
Yeah.
K. Brown, Leslie Uggams. And like me, you've probably heard of the big premise of American Fiction, which is this stuffy writer who writes literary fiction, lowers himself to write this trashy novel as an FU to everything he hates. And then, surprise, it becomes a success and he has to deal with what that means for him as a guy who could use the money. And that's all in the movie. It's really funny. That part's really great. But more than that, I'm like, wait a minute, this is like a family relationship movie. It's about his relationships with his brother and his mom and love relationship. It's a really good all around movie. It's much bigger than what you hear about in the premise. And it's really shined and really entertained and was heartwarming and charming. It was a really good movie.
Nice. I would do want to check that out. Once I see Jeffrey Wright pop up in something, I know it's got to have a minimum baseline of at least being okay. That's the lowest it can be because he brings a certain quality to every film.
He's so good.
Nash, I'm going to save you for last for reasons that will become obvious in a few minutes.
For dumbass reasons.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things that's ever happened on this podcast. So much better than if things had just gone according to plan. But yeah, Ian, you watched this as well, so we can do a little bit of a collab on this show and tell.
Yeah.
I checked out the Jake Gyllenhaal Roadhouse, which just dropped. And I think we come from two different backgrounds in regards to Roadhouse, because I am a more recent convert, but a big fan of the Swayze one. And you don't really remember it, right? Is that how you describe it?
You know what? I lived through the Swayze era, but I somehow missed those films during their original runs and then their cable and rental runs. So like I didn't see Dirty Dancing until 2 years ago. I did see Ghosts in the theaters, but like Roadhouse was one that I just totally missed. So after watching this Roadhouse, I learned some more about the original just to understand the differences.
Yeah, I didn't see it till a few years ago either. And I'm going to give my friend Matt all the credit for getting me on board with the Swayze one, because he frequently was like, it's the best movie ever. He goes to the hospital and the doctor's trying to fix him up and he says, pain don't hurt, which is just like, isn't that the dumbest thing you've ever heard? And I was like, yeah, it is. I love it. The Swayze movie takes itself like deadly serious. And then the Gyllenhaal movie is almost a Naked Gun version of Roadhouse. It's heavy on the comedy, but most of the comedy just comes from Gyllenhaal being a fucking weirdo and crazy person, which I love. He brings this kind of chaotic energy to almost every role he's done for like the past 15 years, I think. It's very much my shit, but we discovered the secret meaning of this movie. Whoever wrote this movie has an agenda. They're out to get the UFC refs. They want to really make a statement about refereeing in the UFC.
It's nothing that UFC fans haven't talked about before, but the movie really puts a sharp point on it.
Yeah, without spoiling too much, there's some pretty horrendous refereeing in this movie. The backstory is Gyllenhaal's Dalton character is a retired or on the lam kind of UFC fighter.
Yeah, run out of town, ran away from his pain.
And when you find out why, it's almost hilariously inept. I think it was Steve Mazzagatti in the movie actually refereeing. That's for my UFC fans only.
We wouldn't be surprised.
And Nash, that brings us to you.
Yes, it does.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you watched this week besides the 2017 Mummy?
So as it turns out, I'm illiterate. And when John reached out to me about this, he was like, hey, watch 2017's The Mummy. And I was like, Mummy? I know that franchise. But the original didn't come out in 2017. So I just assumed, because again, can't read, that I was watching the Mummy sequel, which didn't come out in 2017 at all. The Mummy 2, Mummy Returns, or whatever it is. And so I logged on to do this original recording
24 hours ago.
John was like, Tom Cruise. And I do not remember Tom Cruise, but I have a lot of thoughts about Dwayne's hairline. They made a balding man bald. That's rude. That's rude as fuck. But we didn't get to talk about Dwayne The Rock Johnson's hairdo.
No.
Because I watched the wrong film.
It's so much better than if we had just recorded a straight up episode last night.
I know.
It's another layer of lore to this episode that will only enhance the experience.
I've watched so much Egyptian shit.
It was an awkward moment.
Yeah. I did it on purpose for the comedy.
But what it turned into is a wonderful amount of deep research. Like you're so prepared to talk about mummy movies in general and do some AB.
We're going to have you back to do Exodus Gods of Egypt in now a year.
Everything Egyptian that you touch from this point forward, I will be your special guest.
So other thoughts on the movie, or you want to put that out of your memory?
Oh man, I had so many thoughts about them. I mostly wrote them down because I was like, I need to make sure I have this for historical data. I wanted to call CPS literally 2 minutes into the movie. Whatever the British version of this is, they are not good parents in this film at all. This is Evie and...
No, they're constantly putting their kids in danger. I remember that much.
Like they're just, and they're so into one another, and it's, oh my God, their love story, but they're just like making out in front of their kid who's being eaten by rats in a tomb. Guys, pay attention to your child. So that was pretty brutal. But I feel like both of these movies share a similar theme in that they did not know what they wanted their people to be doing at any point. They were like, Brendan Fraser can do whatever he wants to do, and we'll just follow that man doing things.
They were right.
Brendan Fraser deserves every single award that Hollywood can throw at him. And it's only for the line, I wrote it down because I want to get it tattooed on my body, I'm in mourning for my ass. Because he gets shot in the butt.
I was like wondering what happened to his ass. Was it metaphorical or literal? Sorry to make you explain that line.
Very good looking cast though. Oded Fair, he's like one of the handsomest men.
And you know, you look at him now, like in a modern context, and you're like, damn, this man walked so Post Malone could run.
Post Malone, I wouldn't be surprised if he was a big fan of the Mummy franchise. He seems like a dork in a lot of ways. Also, he cameos in Roadhouse.
Does he?
Bringing it back around. That's right. He's up at the beginning.
Yeah. But yeah, the 2017 Mummy.
Yeah.
Another failed attempt to start the Dark Universe, which is an oft attempted endeavor that Universal Pictures has embarked upon to great failure. They tried it with Benicio del Toro's Wolfman. They tried it with Dracula Untold, the Luke Evans Dracula movie that was absolutely dog shit.
Oh.
And they tried it with 2017's The Mummy, and it never quite took off because I don't think the youth is clamoring for like a new Bride of Frankenstein the same way they want like an Iron Man movie, you know?
I hear that, but still, like me, I guess I'm not the youth at all. I'm two youths in a trench coat. I am clamoring for Universal movie monsters. I think that's one of the most noble, as far as cheesy Hollywood universe building, like Dark Universe, build that one, you know, like
Exactly.
I'd give up the DC universe for the Dark Universe or the Fast and Furious universe.
Yeah, that's not a fair comparison.
I know. Well, I was trying to I wasn't sure if I would totally throw away the Marvel universe, although it's had its ups and downs, but
I would cut it short.
Yeah, cut it short and send somebody with talent over to Universal and figure out how to make this thing work.
Nash, are you a big fan of the Universal monster movies? Was Creature from the Black Lagoon one of these?
I think so.
I don't know about the monster aspect, but I spent this movie and even the Scorpion King really desperately wishing that they had done this correctly, because there's a whole lot of lore in Egypt and their god structure is so fascinating and overlapping. You could absolutely have made a phenomenal movie of this concept. And it's just every time white Hollywood goes to Egypt, it's almost painful. And this is a movie, this one that I also watched, this is a movie about Egypt and Egyptian gods, but it's set in England with Americans. So it's really all over the place. Colonialism.
I get what you're saying. Like they had a huge well of stuff to draw from and they were like, you know what? There's a bad guy. There's like a scary devil. And that's all you need to know. There's a devil and a dagger and you don't learn a damn thing about Egyptian mythology besides that.
If you take this creature monster and just are like, she's a ghost, like this could easily have been a ghost movie. There's nothing about it that's uniquely Egyptian necessarily.
It's just for the decor. We're going to style her as an Egyptian and we're going to do some sand dunes. And I like all those things too about the setting, but it's very thin. It's not what the movie's about.
And there is clearly a struggle happening. And you can see it on screen if you're aware of it beforehand. Like the first time I watched this, I was mostly just along for the ride. And I do kind of like this movie, but
I do too. I should say that.
When you watch it a second time, you can see that there's multiple agendas at work and they're in conflict with each other. And that's very much the narrative that came up during production. I sent you a Vulture article, Ian, about this movie, and it was basically trying to paint Tom Cruise as like the mastermind of the movie we ended up getting. He ghost directed it. He threw his weight around and he basically hamstrung the movie to be more of a Tom Cruise action adventure than whatever the director intended.
I saw that criticism in that article, and that criticism shows up also across a lot of the other things that critics had to say, and even that audiences had to say, if you believe the people who are commenters on Rotten Tomatoes. But for me, that was a plus for the movie, because I think that Tom Cruise, besides some of his faults, he's got incredible instincts for filmmaking. Yeah, he wrangled this movie, but he wrangled it into a mold that I like, which is old school action adventure featuring a scoundrel whose greed gets him in trouble and finds his heart of gold. I like that package.
Oh, see, I want to disagree with you so bad.
Okay, that's great.
Do it.
I feel like Tom entered every single scene. Like, I'm actually in a comedy, and it's really jarring against the backdrop they had created, because his character all of a sudden like, hey, I'm funny now, just for a one-liner, and no one else reacts to it. Everybody else is serious as a heart attack, and he's just like, what if I was hilarious secretly?
Which is, it's an interesting choice when you have Jake Johnson there as the sidekick, who actually is a naturally hilarious person. Like, I thought he was going to be the comic relief and Cruise was going to be like the sullen badass, you know, like Ethan Hunt that we've come to know. But yeah, no, it's more like a buddy comedy when the two of them are on screen together.
Yeah.
But that's not to say I didn't laugh at the jokes. It was totally jarring, but I still think the jokes landed most of the time. People were like, oh, he completely took over the entire cargo plane sequence when they're leaving to go back to England. And I was like, yeah, but that sequence rules.
That's the best part of the movie.
Like all the birds flying through the window. Like that was like one of the truly captivating set pieces.
I mean, the birds were great. I have a question about why did this plane have like sarcophagus holds? It just already had those straps to the floor. It was like, what if we have to bring an ancient mummy home from Mesopotamia, which is modern day Iraq, where we're fighting a war? We need to have these.
The Mummy 130, that's the plane that they put it on. So always gassed and ready to go on the runway.
With their hand archaeologists.
The American military's motto is always be prepared.
I think that's the Boy Scouts, actually.
Do you guys want to, so I've alluded to the behind the scenes struggle with this movie. Should I get into the nitty gritty of it?
Let's go.
Yeah, why don't you tell us how this thing happened?
All right. When I say The Mummy, what do you picture? Maybe Brendan Fraser or Rachel Weisz? Maybe some terrible Scorpion King CGI? Whatever your answer, I bet it's not Tom Cruise.
What the fuck?
Originally envisioned as part of the Fraser and Weisz Mummyverse, plans for a new Mummy movie started in the early 2010s. Fearing that audiences' sensibilities had shifted and they wouldn't want the same kind of lighthearted adventure fare as the original trilogy, Universal made the decision to reboot the series and disconnect it from the beloved films. John Spates, who wrote Prometheus, was brought on board to write the first draft of the screenplay, and Len Weissman, best known at the time for his work on the Underworld series, would serve as director. Weissman bowed out of the project in July 2013 to focus on his TV series, Sleepy Hollow, which had a pretty cool first season. Andy Muschietti was the next director attached, but he would leave in May 2014 after conflict with the producers. Muschietti wanted to adhere to Weissman's vision of a darker, horror-focused movie, while the producers were starting to get cold feet and wanted to take a more family-friendly approach to the material.
We should make a movie you can take your mummy to.
After Muschietti left the film, Alex Kurtzman, who had been producing the film and also worked on the script, was brought on to direct the nearly $200 million picture, despite only having directed one movie at the time, the 2012 Chris Pine drama People Like Us, which was made for $16 million. Chris Morgan, who was credited with rebooting the Fast and the Furious franchise and making sense of their fucked up timeline, was brought in to help oversee a new shared universe called the Dark Universe, which would feature interconnected films based on the Universal monsters like Dracula, Frankenstein, Wolfman, etc.
They planned a mash. They planned a monster mash.
Jenny Lumet, who wrote Rachel Getting Married, was brought in for another round of rewrites and made substantial changes, swapping the gender of the titular mummy and giving her less tropey motivations. Shooting was being continuously delayed due to the constant turnover of the creative team, and the production still hadn't found its star. Tom Cruise was finally cast as the lead in late 2015 and was reportedly paid $13 million for the role, plus was given a degree of creative control over the project.
Give control to Major Tom.
Sofia Boutella was cast in December 2015, with Annabelle Wallis, Jake Johnson, and Courtney B. Vance were brought on between March and April of 2016. The biggest role yet to be cast was that of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, who was expected to get their own spin-off film in the future. Tom Hardy was the first choice, but wanted too much money, and Javier Bardem was also courted, but no deal was reached. Russell Crowe was eventually picked in May 2016, a month after filming already began in Oxford, and the cast was set. Filming wrapped in August 2016, and reports were already rolling in about a troubled production. Cruise was said by many to have been the real director of The Mummy, plotting out action sequences and bringing in as many as 4 additional writers, including his frequent collaborators Christopher McQuarrie and Dylan Koosman, to make the film into more of a pure Cruise vehicle, reducing Boutella's role while amplifying his. There were rumblings that Universal was unhappy with Cruise's changes, but what can you do? It's Tom Cruise.
Sometimes you gotta say, what the fuck?
With a June 9th, 2017 release date fast approaching, early reviews for the movie were absolutely dismal, and it currently has a 15% on Rotten Tomatoes. Whether it was bad buzz, bad reviews, blockbuster fatigue, or anti-Cruise sentiment, the movie opened in second place behind week 2 of Wonder Woman, only bringing in $31.7 million, less than any of the Fraser-led movies debuted with. It would do better overseas, earning a decent $410 million worldwide, but the bloated budget and substantial marketing cost meant the film still lost Universal somewhere in the neighborhood of $90 million.
And that's a wrap. Get it?
Should I have wrapped my monologue? Add another layer to that?
That would be too much wordplay. I don't think the pod could survive that. You spun it, John, in a way that didn't sound nearly as negative as the Variety article. Like you didn't say monstrous Tom Cruise came in and fucked the whole movie up.
I take issue with that Variety article for a few reasons. One of which being, though, that we all know Tom Cruise is part of an evil cult. Not just part of, but like a high-ranking member.
The Shadow King.
The Shadow King. The boy who would be Prince or whatever. But all that being said, every review from people that have worked with him on his movies is that he's just like an absolute pleasure to work with. He comes in with his lines memorized. He knows his marks. He knows everyone on set's name. He gives out extravagant gifts to all the cast and crew. So I just have a hard time parsing that with the common knowledge around how he conducts himself on set.
Yeah, to armchair psychoanalyze him is very interesting because his inner life must be really freaky. He's like a consummate professional in his film career, and then who knows what the fuck goes on with him.
Yeah, we are not trying to sugarcoat or downplay the darkness at the edges of his life, but just saying that how he is on set does not line up with what people were saying about his behavior.
And I think some of that, I'm not defending him whatsoever, but I do think some of that comes from just the nature of cults in general. They have a tendency to eradicate your base level objections as a person with morality to make it to the levels that he is at. I think critical thinking doesn't come into play anymore. And so I'm not saying this is the case, but it's possible that he is a genuinely nice person that just got wrapped up in something that he can no longer get out of.
Oh, and I'm sure he can't get out of it
Oh, yeah.
for a number of reasons. We see how they do with people who try to leave.
Yeah, they're very good at setting the barbs, apparently.
Allegedly.
Yeah, I feel like I've thought something like that privately, Nash, and just been scared to say it, that maybe he's just in over his head. It's like we're making excuses for one of the wealthiest white dudes in the world, but at the same time, I'm like, he's been in this shit since he was like a teenager.
Yeah.
Like, he probably can't get out at this point.
Like, I just got super into cults recently, so I watched every documentary that exists about cults on Netflix.
But hopefully not literally.
Every single one of them, so I could start my own. But you do watch how cults, their whole position is to isolate you, to make it very difficult for you to ever leave, even if you suddenly find yourself at odds with the message. I'm not saying that's the case for Tom Cruise. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that's the thing.
Yeah.
What was the most interesting cult you got into through this research? Because I'm also like not aficionado, not on your level, but I like a cult documentary.
I think the Mother God cult is the most wild one. You familiar with that
I don't
one?
know if I'm familiar with them.
So there's a documentary on Netflix about her, but she basically was just like, she believed that she was the embodiment of a female god, and people followed her around. She started taking like colloidal silver. So at some point she decided it was like a cure-all for everything, but she started turning blue from silver poisoning. She was deeply mentally unwell. She also had like an aggressive anorexia that went untreated. Basically, she wasted and died from alcoholism. And it's so wild listening to the story, and the people who are still, that cult is still active.
Pick a vice, lady.
Yeah, right. But it's still active today, waiting for her to return to Earth again. She also believed that she was the reincarnation of the god, and that it had been previous celebrities before. Like, she was also Robin Williams at some point, even though she and Robin Williams shared the same time span. Very weird.
Oh, yeah.
Right, they were both alive
Yeah.
at the same time. They'd be like Jesus being like, I like this lead paint so much, I'm just going to drink it all. And they was like, bravo, man, that's the fucking savior.
Yeah, there he is.
You know?
It's a form of martyrdom, I guess.
It's a wild story.
Yeah, funny enough, the titular character in this movie drank a bunch of Quicksilver, and she came back to life eventually, too.
That's right. Speaking of which, Ian, do you want to start talking about the storyline?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Beneath present-day London, a tunnel-digging crew unearths a tomb filled with the remains of medieval Crusader knights. The dig site is quickly taken over by the mysterious Dr. Henry Jekyll, played by Russell Crowe, who recognized the inscriptions on the tomb walls and recalls the tale of the ancient Egyptian princess Amenet. Amenet made a pact with the god of the dead and attempted to usurp power and become pharaoh, but she was foiled in her plans and buried alive in Mesopotamia. Meanwhile, in war-torn Iraq, U.S. Army Sergeant Nick Morton, played by Tom Cruise, and his buddy, Corporal Chris Vail, played by Jake Johnson, are tasked with long-range reconnaissance, but they actually spend their time stealing antiquities to sell on the black market. Naughty boys. Nick locates an ancient underground tomb with the help of a map he recently stole from a beautiful archaeologist, Dr. Jenny Halsey, played by Annabelle Wallis. But Jenny catches up with Nick at the site, and Nick's commanding officer, Colonel Greenway, played by Courtney B. Vance, makes them all go down into the tomb together to investigate. As Jenny observes that the burial site's construction seems more like a prison than a tomb, Nick begins having visions of Amenet. Meanwhile, Nick's buddy Vale is bitten by a spider. With a sandstorm approaching, Colonel Greenway has them quickly hoist up the sarcophagus, and they all pile into a cargo plane and take off. In the air, Vale succumbs to spider poison, and then he comes right back to life as a zombie and attacks, forcing Nick to shoot him dead again. Then a flock of ravens attacks the plane's cockpit and destroys the engines, sending it into a tailspin. Nick saves Jenny by strapping her with a parachute and pushing her out the door, but it's too late for Nick. He's stuck on the plane as it spirals violently into the ground. Nick is dead. That is, until he wakes up the next morning in the morgue.
Jesus Christ, I didn't realize how much happened in this first act.
I know.
This is jam-packed with shit.
There's a ton of plot in the movie. Maybe that's a problem for some people. It didn't feel overly plotty, though. Like, it's pretty propulsive, and I was going to say it starts with plenty of action because there's a whole Iraq war insurgent battle, but
No.
It does not start with action.
On second watch, I hate this whole opening sequence with the Crusades and the knights and the tomb. Like,
That's heavy-handed.
it slows the movie down and also doesn't really matter. Like, we see this little stone. They got the stone. All right, cool. Like, someone couldn't have found that somewhere else. Like, we didn't need this like 4-minute intro.
And for like history purposes, it was like a red herring almost, or like a real mislead. You're in Britain for some reason in a movie that you know is not about the Crusades. And you're like, oh, this Crusader tomb. And you're just like, are we trying to be Indiana Jones? Pick our lane and stay inside of it. The Crusaders were buried underneath London. It was just like useless information. It's like, cool, good for them.
Yeah, they're digging a new tunnel and they find it. But that could have all been achieved with the Vale and Nick action scene. Like, that you could have opened the movie with that The big sinkhole opens up. Everything you need could have been in that sinkhole, and you could have just skipped that big opening sequence, you know?
It's a little bit weighted down with the freight of the Dark Universe, right? That's where they're like, oh, but you know what? Prodigium is headquartered in England. Jekyll's there. We've got to like plant things there and establish that he has a force of workers that can take over dig sites when they want to. And he's imperious and he's mysterious. But it was a little bit too much. What do they call that? Pipe laying? Laying pipe? Is that they call it that?
No, Ian. That's a different thing.
Something I say in inappropriate situations.
Yeah. There's no such thing as too much pipe laying. You know what I'm saying? No, but I will say without this intro, we would not have gotten the scene where Russell Crowe marches in and like kicks out everyone. And then somebody's like, hey, you can't, what are you doing? This is my dig site. And he pulls an envelope out of the inside pocket of his jacket and just hands it to him. Like he knew somebody was going to say that to him. And he was like, I wrote it down on a piece of paper. I put it in an envelope and I'm just going to hand it to you. And I'm not going to say a fucking thing. Like that's a thing that only happens in movies, but it's one of those tropes that I'm still not sick of. I'm very much a fan. And Russell Crowe I fucking love Russell Crowe, especially late Russell Crowe where he doesn't give a shit.
The other reason though that I was like glad they went to England and that I felt was justified was they needed to do a horror scene in an English abbey because that's the fucking traditional place for Universal horror movies to occur. And so like, we've got to engineer this. How do we make that happen? And they did, which I liked, but yeah, it was a little bit of effort to get there.
All right. I think we're all on board with the fact that the intro was probably extraneous, but it did some cool stuff. So let's get into the cruise of it all.
Yeah.
He's not playing the kind of hard-ass, straight-faced Tom Cruise character that I feel like he's played too often lately.
Not as heroic.
Yeah, he's not as heroic. He reminded me of his performance in Edge of Tomorrow, which is like one of the more recent movies he's made that I really liked. He's kind of a coward and kind of a piece of shit.
And he's good at it. I first noticed Tom Cruise, like I knew about him in Risky Business, which I think like he was still a kid in that. But like his performance in Rain Man was the first one that stuck out to me. And I'm like, this guy plays a really good asshole. And so I still like something about that. So I like the asshole that he plays in this.
That was kind of his guy in his early career, like The Color of Money, Rain Man, Top Gun. Even Interview with a Vampire, he was just like a brash dickhead. And then he kind of moved away from it and got super self-serious. So it was refreshing to see him in like a more recent role where he's kind of silly. I know, Nash, you have some thoughts.
So for me, I was like, man, I feel like he was a total miscast. Like I would have put Jake Johnson in his role and I think it would have been way better.
He is playing a Jake Johnson-esque character. I feel like Jake Johnson now is like the Cruise we were talking about back in the day when he was like coming up, like a lovable dickhead, charming, but still like sleazy.
Yeah.
And yeah. Maybe it's just hard to see Cruise in that light now that he's so much of a polished movie star.
And I feel like the last billion things he's been in, he's played the same character, the action hero that's like the strong silent type. I don't find him charming enough to have pulled off this character.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the dilemma of the movie is like how much you buy into him as this guy will really determine whether or not you're on board for the rest of the movie because he's in almost 100% of the scenes. He's the guy.
He's the guy.
And to Nash's point, the tone is the one part of the movie that it really struggles with. It's trying to be a horror movie at its core, I believe, because that's what you start with when you call it The Mummy. But it's trying to be an action adventure in an Indiana Jones vein. And it's trying to be a romance and it's trying to be a comedy. And that's a lot.
And it's trying to start a universe.
It's trying to start a universe that is some combination of other things, maybe, but you're not even sure if the universe has room for dead serious, like tragic horror dramas, which some of them probably should be. Like Mummy, we expect some comedy and some romance, but you don't necessarily want that from all of your horror movies. So,
well, Dracula Untold was a dead serious horror drama and people hated it. So maybe that had something to do with like the kind of tonal shift here, because that was supposed to be the start of this universe. And then they were like, no, forget about that. This is the real start. And then they were like, forget it. We're just not going to do this now.
So let's shift to Annabelle, who we like. We loved her in Malignant.
Yeah, Malignant rules.
She came on screen here. I'm like, somebody check the back of her head. Let's just make sure.
Is Gabriel back there? Creepy ass Gabriel. Nash, did you see Malignant?
No.
It's fucking insane. You should watch it. It's so much fun. It's not scary at all. But I know you actually like scary movies, so you wouldn't be scared.
I do, yeah.
But it's not really scary. It's more of an insane action movie.
It's wonderfully outrageous. It's really cool.
Or you could just listen to our episode on it with Haley.
I was going to say, I'll just go back and listen to The Blast Zone.
Great companion piece.
The Blast Zone. Oh, too soon.
But as much as I like Annabelle Wallis, she has that problem that Nash was bringing up, that she's a little too serious most of the time. Tom Cruise is going back and forth between kind of serious action hero, but then he'll let the big wisecracks come out and you know that he's playing them for comedy. And she's not sure whether to let any of her emotions run. Like she has these lines that are sometimes supposed to be where the straight-laced scientist gets emotional. To me, I think that's supposed to be what's happening in the scenes. And she doesn't let that character cross that boundary, which leaves her to me a little bit cold. And like, if those scenes didn't work work as rom-com inside of action, inside of horror. I blame her a little bit for some of that, as much as I don't want to.
Yeah, she's not really going for it in that sense that we know she can, from Malignant at least, and plenty of her other work. Like, she's not an untalented actress. She's just playing the character as very, like, reserved. I wish she would have gone for it a little more. She's not bad. She's just flat. There's not a lot of dynamics to her performance.
Yeah.
And they had no chemistry between them. It felt so forced the first time she was like, oh, he was in my room last night. And I was like, bitch, no, he wasn't. Don't lie to us. There's like nothing between the two of you. And then as the movie goes on, I feel like they get more settled into this idea of friends than this like romance connection. So when the romance is like really built up at the very end, I'm like, this is not believable. Like, to me, and this is probably just projection, I was like, she's a lesbian and she just doesn't know it yet. You know what I mean? So she's like finding dudes that are like deliberately gross and unattainable. But then where she comes out of this like emotion, I'm like, no, baby. And also, I understand that acting is difficult and that she probably worked very hard on this. And so I don't want to hurt her feelings. But at a certain point, I did have to Google her to see if her accent was real, because it doesn't sound real, but it is how she really talks.
It's like one of those things where, who are we talking about that doesn't really have...
Clive Owen.
Yeah, Clive Owen. Like, is he British? Is he from New Zealand, or is he just like a weirdo?
Just talk weird.
Yeah, like every once in a while she said a word super British and then it faded in and out. And I was like, this sounds fictional. It really wasn't. But I do feel like some of the problems of her character really come from the fact that she's supposed to be a straight-laced archaeologist academic. And in reality, she doesn't really do that work. And she's also been contracted by the American military to follow them around in warfare. And that does not come through at all. At any point, the writers, Annabelle, Tom, could have Googled anything about her and come up with a better explanation for her presence.
Are you saying I should revoke my job applications to the U.S. military to follow them around as an archaeologist?
And snatch up mummies? Well, wait, to be fair to the screenwriters, I think she was only working for Henry Jekyll. I think she was in Iraq at the same time.
Not Mr. Hyde?
Military. But sometimes she had to work for Eddie Hyde too, but she was not working for Courtney B. Vance. She was catching up with him there. But remember, he stole her letter, and her letter was signed by Henry Jekyll. He was the one who said, go to Iraq, here's the town to show up at.
But then why would the military move the sarcophagus back for her? You know, I mean, I understand that they crash landed, but like...
Right. Well, she also had an envelope. You didn't see that scene, but she had an envelope and she handed it to Courtney B. Vance's character, and he had to do what it said inside.
Did he do? I would have been like, no.
Oh, I thought you were saying she bribed him. That made sense too.
No, she had one of Russell Crowe's envelopes that just
she's
get out of jail free card.
Because I'm not bringing your sarcophagus back. She just envelope. Yes, you are.
Yeah. No, that they definitely glossed over. Like, why the fuck did they just order up a C-130 to emergency evacuate them when they have a military mission to go on?
Can we just take a minute to heap praise on Jake Johnson?
Yeah.
Who's quickly becoming my favorite actor.
He's so
He carried the whole beginning of this movie, because otherwise their presence in Iraq also doesn't make any sense. They're treasure hunters, but they also work with the military, but they ended up separated from their entire unit.
So their long-range reconnaissance, which I think they do get a little bit of latitude to go out on their own, but they were given a mission and they
didn't do
somewhere
it.
else.
They were just like,
which feels like it was going to catch up to them eventually one way or another.
Guess not.
They make a crack about like, if they find out where we really are, we'll get court-martialed and spend 25 years in Leavenworth.
But then they do, because they have to call in an airstrike.
And then they have to talk their way out of it, which was awkward. But Jake Johnson calling in the airstrike, I thought was risky, because how do they know not to hit him?
danger close, as they say. Yeah, he gets a fun role when he's alive, and then his role gets more fun, I thought, when he's dead. That to me was like, okay, this is a horror movie, because there's mysticism in your Indiana Jones stuff, and a little bit of supernatural will creep in at the edges, but it doesn't go full on horror. But this movie's like, is this just an action adventure? And then you're like, no, the dead guy's coming after you. This is a horror movie, and you get a cool chill out of that.
Yeah, when he stabs Courtney B. Vance, that was a shocking moment that I thought was really well done. But then they play it for comedy right after that when Cruise has to shoot him, and he shoots him like the third time as a joke.
See, that I love that moment. And there's so many of them, and I'll probably call them out.
She had also just been like, don't fire a gun in here. It's pressurized. And he fires it 3 times and doesn't ever acknowledge that she just said that. She's just like, oh, whoops. It's like the actors can't hear one another talking.
And they just like try to like, he was moving pretty slow. They could have just probably shoved him. He wasn't exactly like.
The third shot, though, you got to like, that was a good gag. I love that. The comic timing of that, I thought, was really well done.
Yo, I laughed, but is now the time to be breaking the tension, I guess, is the question.
Right? Because you just shot your friend. It's not the moment.
Yeah, it's definitely a question of tone. And then it goes into hardcore Tom Cruise action movie shit with a plane falling out of the air, which which is done really well in a Mission Impossible kind of a vein. But you're like, wait, well, I thought it was just horror, and now it's action adventure. And then that scene ends with, oh no, it's horror, because in the action adventure, the hero does not go down with the plane. I also love that moment, him screaming as he crashed into the ground. I'm like, holy shit, they just killed the hero.
Yeah.
But then he didn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he pops up in a body bag. Yeah.
Which, like, the details of his possession were never 1,000% clear to me. I don't know about you guys, if you were like, when he woke up, I was like, okay, something weird's going on. But they never really dial in exactly like what his powers are at that point. And then he gets even more powerful later. But that's.
But I don't think he had powers at that point. It's like really shittily explained as he was her chosen vessel to host Set. And so she brought him back because he wasn't supposed to have died in the crash because she needed him. But I'm like, why can't you do that with a dead body? You know what I mean? You're saying he has to be alive for you to possess him with a god? That can't be true. The dagger seems more powerful than that.
Yeah, the dagger has a specific mechanism where it needs to be stabbed into a living heart, I guess. That's just conjecture.
I hate when daggers are like that.
I do want to say, though, while I shit on everyone else that's acted in this movie, the actress that plays Aminet is actually fantastic. Even though some of her movements are dumb, at some point I was like, is this Gollum's backstory? Like, why can't she not use her legs? She acted the hell out of this.
Yeah, Sofia Boutella is pretty great. I haven't seen a ton of her stuff, but like she was the only good part about that dog shit ass Rebel Moon movie. I'm kind of bummed she didn't get more to do in this, because once she is the mummy, she goes a little one note. Even in like that intro scene with her, we get more of a sense of she's a fully fleshed out character. She's not evil, but she's ambitious, and she feels stymied by the societal restrictions put on her as a woman. But then she's just like a mean demon person. And I was like, I would have liked more of those layers that we got early on to pop up later.
And she has to communicate a lot of what you were just talking about without dialogue, right? It's like a flashback montage of life in ancient Egypt. And she successfully communicates a lot of that feeling without having a lot of words to actually say. That was good.
Yeah.
And I have a lot to add to the Egyptian backstory part of this, but we're not there yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Should we jump ahead to Act 2?
I'm ready.
Go for it.
All right. In a British morgue, Nick wakes up and tears his way out of a body bag, confused as to why he's not dead. Meanwhile, in the debris field of the crash, Aminet escapes her sarcophagus and proceeds to suck the life force out of some crash investigators, turning them into her mummified minions. Jenny explains to Nick that the Crusader Knight's tomb may contain the Dagger of Set, an artifact Aminet needs to complete her pact with the god of the dead. Then the ghost of Nick's friend Vale appears and explains that Aminet has big plans for Nick. He's her chosen one. Nick and Jenny go to a spooky abbey near the crash site where Aminet grabs Nick and prepares to stab him with the Dagger of Set, bringing the death god to life in Nick's body. But at the last moment, she realizes the knife is missing the ruby from its hilt. An extended fight and chase ensues, and in the end, Nick and Jenny are saved when a group of commandos appear and capture Aminet and take her to the headquarters of a group called Prodigium. Prodigium is run by Dr. Henry Jekyll, and he happens to be Jenny's boss too. Jekyll has a plan to destroy the evil god Set, but Nick and Jenny are unhappy to find out it involves letting Nick get killed with the big scary dagger. As Nick argues for a better plan, Jekyll transforms into his alter ego Eddie Hyde, and the two have a violent fight before Nick can finally subdue him with a dose of serum. Nick and Jenny escape into London and head for the underground Crusader burial chamber in search of the missing ruby, but meanwhile, Aminet frees herself and follows hot on their heels.
She is hot. She's a hot mummy. There's the tradition of hot mummies, right? Going all the way back to Mummy Returns. Is that when we first got a hot mummy on screen?
Wasn't that the first mummy we got a hot mummy?
Was it the first one? I wasn't sure which one starred the...
Anaxinamun is classically gorgeous in every iteration.
Patricia Velasquez, yeah.
Yes.
That's right.
Yep.
She played them in both movies. Yeah,
cool.
Anaxinamun. Now, Nash, I feel like this is going to be your time to shine, right?
This is my heavy lifting.
They're starting to pile on the Egyptian mythology. We're going to give you the floor for whatever you want to comment about the mythology on display here.
I wanted to say I hated this a lot. From the moment they were like, the gods said, I was like, this is going to be wrong and bad, because the West does this all the time with the Egyptian pantheon, and automatically Set becomes the god of death. But he wasn't the god of death. He's the god of chaos, and he's Osiris's brother. So they are together, sort of the cycle of whatever word I'm looking for, life and chaos. Now, Set's son is Anubis, and Anubis, we all know, also becomes the god of death in a way that he's kind of sort of not, because we also have Horus in the mix too. And so the Egyptians didn't really have a god of death per se. There was like everybody was involved in this antithesis of life movement. But Anubis is the god of the underworld. So he's more understood. And we see that in the regular mummy. You know, Anubis is the god of death, the army guy. Right off the bat, I was like, Set would never do this. He would never do anybody like this. I mean, he did like chaos, but he wasn't a big believer in death for death's sake, or just being the devil, which at some point they do call him the devil, which is pretty egregious.
In a cheap way, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of subtleties in the Egyptian god pantheon that we just never ever get in these films. But it is really fascinating archaeologically, historically, anthropologically. And I wish that any of the Mummy movies had ever done anything with this. So that's my soapbox. I would like to get off now and just be like, the next time someone tackles one of these movies, please just do it correctly. Hire a team of historians and archaeologists to talk you through what you're going to do.
Or just hire Nash and Angel.
But anyway, my second beef was Amina becomes radicalized by the birth of her brother. But in ancient Egyptian history, we have women inheriting thrones, even over male siblings. We have women kings. We have daughters who take over the thrones, who marry their fathers, marry their brothers, and rule together as equals. It's not like a monarchy like Britain is, where women can't inherit anything. So the fact that she kills her baby brother because she's not going to inherit the throne is inherently incorrect, like when you're looking at Egyptian history and how Egyptian power passes through. So that was also just like, if you're going to make her evil and a murderer, you can't give her that reason, because she would have never done it for that reason. She would have inherited the throne, probably married her baby brother for convenience, and then called it a day. So that was also a little frustrating.
To be clear, you're not advocating for the marriage of baby brothers.
No, not in modern day. If you were in ancient Egypt, fine, go ahead, marry your baby brother for power, but don't kill him.
Right.
But I'm just saying she had a lot of other options that weren't murdering her father, who she loved, and her baby brother, who she had maybe no feelings for. Really wasn't worth doing, especially in the way that she did it. I also had a lot of questions about the ritual itself. I won't get into why I had problems with the ritual, but at a certain point in the ritual, her eyes do this crazy split thing, and they come back to that a couple times, but they never explain what it is at all or use it in any way. Is she giving the vision of the gods?
Yeah, she's got double irises, or
it's like, ooh, what is that? But it doesn't do anything at all. It just indicates that she's evil now, I guess.
Maybe she just has a really bad astigmatism.
So bad. After she does this ritual.
That's why I can't get LASIK, because I have it. Do my eyes ever do that, Ian?
Sometimes. I don't call it out. I don't want to make you self-conscious.
Oh.
I mean, all of that stuff that you talked about, Nash, it's classic cheesy Hollywoodization of stories that would otherwise be interesting. And you can sense it. For me, knowing nothing about Egyptian history, even I could tell. They cheesed it up. Like Henry Jekyll, later on, Nick asked him, so he's kind of just the devil, right? And he's like, yeah, he's just the devil. Let's just cut to it here. And then even when they show Set popping out of the shadows, he's like a weird, creepy devil guy. He doesn't even look like anything iconographically Egyptian at that point. They're just like, oh yeah, that guy, that's the devil. Okay, we're just doing a possession movie with a funky dagger. And if you sweat that, I see why it could ruin the movie for you. But I let it pass over me like Quicksilver over a sarcophagus.
Well played, Ian. You brought it back.
Nice.
All right. So we do have notes for this section that are not related to the mythology of it all. I guess we got to think about the movie again now. Like, we're going to sound like idiots.
No, it was just like, let Nash rage for 2 minutes.
Gotta let her out of the bottle.
Yeah, I was like metaphorically just grabbing people's shirts, being like, how dare you?
First of all, I want to say that I would love to drink in that bar that they're in, the pub, you know.
Oh,
Looked very cozy. I bet they have a mean fish and chips on the menu. And
can I call out my next favorite Tom Cruise moment in the movie?
is always pounding shots.
He's pounding shots. Like everyone in the audience is going, what the fuck just happened? He just was dead. We saw his plane crash. He popped up in a morgue. He's not even beat up. He looks jacked and unscathed. And so we're all wondering. And so they had the character ask him. Jenny asked Nick, how did you survive? Do you realize you should be dead? And instead of trying to explain it, it's just Tom Cruise pounding shots. And he looks her in the eye as he pounds some more shots and just shrugs his shoulders and makes this funny expression like he's not even going to answer the question. And I thought that was funny.
Yeah, it was good deadpan comedy.
And those moments kept happening for me. So that was what hooked me along. When the movie got cheesy or stretched my patience, I would get another one of those things. I'm like, oh, a fun thing. I'm still involved. And that's kind of all I need from movies, that scene by scene, something keeps the balloon in the air. And I thought the movie did.
Agreed. How'd you feel about Vale reoccurring as a ghoul or zombie?
Right away, shades of Griffin Dunn. Do you guys remember American Werewolf in London?
No, see, I watched American Werewolf in Paris as a kid and didn't realize that it was a sequel till many years later, and I just never got around to watching the original.
I didn't even know that was a thing, but American Werewolf in London, classic horror movie, incredibly good. And it has this hook, which they're definitely referencing here, which is the main character's best friend dies, a victim of the monster early on, and then he comes back and haunts him and keeps showing up in mirrors, and he's getting more and more decomposed, and he's cynical and dry and quippy, and it's a great bit, and they were definitely going for that here. And it's good. They got Jake Johnson to be a sassy zombie.
Can you tell me something important, Ian?
Yeah.
At any point in American Werewolf in London, do we see a werewolf with a Chinese menu in his hand?
No, but his hair is perfect. So,
oh, Werewolves London. Sorry.
See, I feel like if you were going to have Vale do this, because it's hilarious, and this was me not really buying into this film at all. If you're going to have him do that, you have have to make Tom Cruise super straight-laced. He has to not be comedic in any way because you have to let Jake Johnson do what Jake Johnson is going to do. You know what I mean? You give him this opportunity to jump in as this like sidekick character that nobody else can see that's like really inappropriate, but also is like, you killed me, man. It's hilarious, but you have to give him the space to do that. And he doesn't have it because Tom Cruise keeps trying to take it from him.
That is a criticism I didn't have while watching the movie, but in hindsight, I can certainly get on board with that. It's like the problem we had in Evolution. You can't have two Venkmans.
The old two Venkman problem.
They're trying to do two Venkmans a little bit here. But one of them's dead, which is another wrinkle.
The thing with the Jake Johnson character is he has to also play both scary and comedic. He has to flip and sometimes be an ominous zombie, and sometimes he's a wisecracking friend, and he has to flip back and forth, and that's challenging. Everyone's playing all these moods alternately, and it's a juggling act for the movie. I will admit that.
Yeah. I think a new problem with blockbuster movie writing where it's like every character needs to be able to be a little funny. You used to have characters that were mostly funny and everyone else was just like there. And now it's like the Joss Whedonification of blockbuster movies. Everyone's quippy all the time. And now that we're entrenched in it, I don't necessarily notice it so much until we start trying to look at these movies on more of a deep level.
But I mean, at least with that, there's not characters that stand out aggressively as a foil to that. Like where we have Jenny, who I don't think cracks a smile through most of this film. She's very serious all the time. And I think when you start looking at your main characters and she's the only person that's not making jokes or like being deliberately amusing, she's just there for like sexual interest, even though she's not, I think, a super sexualized character until the end where she's in a fucking white t-shirt for some reason. But I think she made the problem, even though her character shouldn't have. But she was the issue because she was there and never joking around. Whereas I think if she had some of that relaxed comedy, it would have done better. It would have felt more like Shaun of the Dead or like a B-rate British horror film that was like designed to poke fun while being really scary.
Yeah. Actually, now that you mention it, there's one other character that almost never cracks a joke, and it's Aminette. Is this movie maybe a little sexist about whether women can be funny or not?
Yikes.
Because even Courtney B. Vance is cracking jokes in his brief screen time. Jake Johnson, Tom Cruise, both Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
They both get some lines in.
By the way, I love Russell Crowe as Mr. Hyde, like 1,000% more than I like him as Dr. Jekyll.
Okay.
He's just like a Guy Ritchie villain.
The accent change was, he
was
goes
good.
from like super posh to like Cockney.
That man's Australian.
Yeah.
He's not even from the UK. And he nailed it. Like he doesn't even come off as like evil. Like he's just a dude who wants to beat the shit out of everybody because it's fun.
That's true. He's having a good time.
Like he's having the time of his life. I don't know. I really like that character, and I'm bummed we never got like a standalone movie.
I was like, as soon as I saw his like name plaque, I was like, please don't be a fucking Jekyll Hyde joke, because I didn't really understand that his like dark universe connection. So I was like, fucking Christ. As soon as he transformed, I was like, great, fantastic. No, this is exactly what I wanted out of a mummy movie. British literary lore. But the accent was like, that was actually pretty great. It was pretty great.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you want to be mad at it because you could feel the movie manipulating you into caring about this universe that they haven't actually built yet. Like I said to T, and I was like, a lot of this Dr. Jekyll stuff feels extraneous. But then I was like, never mind. He's a Cockney Guy Ritchie villain who's just like beating the shit out of Tom Cruise. Like, I'll watch this for 2 hours.
And I wish they had weaponized it. If they needed to get in a bar fight and they were like, just let him go, Mr. Hyde, just used him as a weapon, that would have made it even better if they had actually applied him in some way. But he didn't really do anything.
Yeah, they literally seal him up in a room just so that he can't affect the plot. It's just an interlude. It's like, okay, everyone, hold on. It's safe. It's not a hat on a hat. This movie is still about the mummy. We got to let Tom Cruise fight Mr. Hyde for one scene, and then it's going to go away, but it's not going to affect anything else.
I know how fucking stupid I am. I did not realize that he was that Dr. Jekyll and that Mr. Hyde until he gave himself the first shot of serum in his office.
Oh, then the movie really worked. It's supposed to sneak up on you like that.
No, I'm just a fucking idiot. Just decades of drug abuse.
No, I was in fear as soon as I saw that name tag. I was like, please don't do what I think you're going to do about that.
But he, like, against all of our better judgment, Russell Crowe won us over.
Yeah.
He's the man. Like, Russell Crowe now he's just like a sloppy Australian guy who doesn't fucking care, but he's still an awesome actor.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a powerful tool to bring into your movie. They did well to get him.
Yeah.
Although I do think it would be funnier. I loved the Cockney play up, but I actually think it would have been funnier if he was Australian when he was Mr. Hyde. Just like totally inexplicably, it was like, do you want to throw some shrimp on the Barbie? Like, let's go.
That would be some cold commentary by the Brits on the Aussies. Like, you want to know what our bad side is? Yeah, he's a fucking Australian.
When you think about what Eddie Hyde likes to get drunk and fight, that sounds like an Australian guy to me.
It does.
It checks out. But also the Brits like to drink and fight too.
Can I wrap up the act with a joke that doesn't end the act, but it's another one of my Tommy Cruise moments that I loved.
Yes.
He has a quiet moment with Jenny on the catwalk where they start to talk about their actual affection for each other, whatever ice cold chemistry might be brewing. And she's telling him how she was really impressed. She thinks he's good at heart. You gave me the only parachute without hesitation. And he holds for the beat. And he says, I thought there was another one. And I was just like, yeah, that was comedy.
Yeah, that got me. I chuckled.
That was good.
All right, Ian, take us home, buddy.
All right, bringing us home. Nick and Jenny fight their way through a sandstorm and an army of mummy minions to try to reach the Crusaders' tomb underneath London for a final showdown. They're swimming through one fully flooded chamber when Aminette appears and tears Jenny away out of Nick's grasp. When Nick catches up in the final chamber, he sees Jenny's lifeless, drowned body, and he's deeply distraught. He tries to fight Aminette, but he's no match for her strength as she tells him to give in to her wishes. She wants to stab him with the dagger of Set and let the death god take over his body, but he says no way and manages to snatch the dagger from her. He's about to smash the ruby when he has a better idea. Nick plunges the dagger into his own heart, letting the god enter him while retaining just a little bit of agency for himself. Now infused with godlike powers, Nick drains all the life force from Aminette, leaving her a shriveled husk. Then he uses his power to bring Jenny back to life. He tells her he did it all to save her, but sadly now he is a monster, half man, half devil, and he must flee while he discovers which side of him will prevail. When we last see Nick, he's roaming the Sahara Desert, haunted by his curse, but reunited with his resurrected best buddy, Chris Vale.
So is Vale immortal now, or is he just like a guy who's alive again? Because it'd be weird hanging out with Tom Cruise, who's immortal and a monster all the time, if you were just like a guy.
I suspect he would have been sort of like Tom Cruise was in the middle.
I think he's just a guy, just like, and like he brought back Jenny too.
Jenny's that kind of thing too. She's resurrected, but does she have some powers or have some ill effects?
They got to at least be like possessed, right? That seems to be part of it. If you're brought back, like you have some visions.
They have visions. They can survive a lot of being thrown around tombs and crashing into stone things without dying.
Yeah.
I think Tom Cruise only had visions because he was connected to Aminette. Like, I don't think the visions come necessarily as being part of the resurrection team.
The resurrection team. I like that. Also, why does he have a horse? We saw how fast he can move on his feet. Faster than any horse.
Because Nick can't go that fast. Or because his buddy can't go that fast. I always want to call him Nick because of...
From New Girl.
New Girl, yeah.
Nick. Sorry, that's how Schmidt says it. Actually, I had a note like that, but I didn't think enough listeners would get it. It's rude to put Jake Johnson in a movie where he's like the sidekick to a character named Nick. Because that is his iconic role still. But I mean, it would have looked goofy if Jake Johnson's riding a horse and Tom Cruise is just running next to him.
He got to do his running in the escape from the British Museum scene, right? He had a Tom Cruise running moment there, which was good. That still works. Still a good look.
Soon he's going to need to be doing it with a walker, like,
it's gonna be
it's more of a gallop at that point, I think.
That's gonna be fun to see.
He's 60 years old.
Yeah, he is. He's 61, I think. I had one beef with this whole section as a side to my minor casual beefs. But the water underneath London is not going to be clear. Okay, we're not going to be able to see anything that's happening in the Thames.
Oh, water under London.
It's not happening. It's not visible. We're not opening our eyes under there. We'll get cholera and typhoid in minutes. That there were whole scenes.
Yeah, that's got to be like
swimming,
chased by zombies. The water.
Yeah, crystal clear Crusader tomb water.
Perfect.
God, how many dissolved bodies are just like floating out of
the corpses of the Crusaders were swimming next to them, and they weren't even given off silt as they went. It stayed pristine in there.
Yes.
They must change their Brita.
So often. The whole city of London. But my other beef is that water is a universal solvent, which means it breaks down everything given a long enough time. So if you've got dead bodies in there from the Crusades, there's absolutely no reasons for there to be skeletal remains in there. Zero, none. There's nothing left.
What you have is very dusty water.
You would have a soup.
Exactly. You've got gross ass sewer water, but you don't have bodies.
So what you're saying is if you want to cover up a murder, just bury them under London for several hundred years, 1,000 years.
Yes,
at least.
That's the way to go. They'll never catch you after 200 years. You're free.
I'm a free man. Oh no, I died of old age. There's shockingly little in this third act happens plot-wise. It is like just a big action set piece. I guess the big turning point of it is Nick accepting his role as this monster to save Jenny and rid the world of Aminette, which is a big move. It's quite a large decision to make, but did it land for you emotionally?
No.
I like the cursed, tortured man type of monster, your Wolfman, etc.
Buster Bluth.
So I thought, oh, that's cool. They turned him into that kind of guy at the end. But it does make you wonder, oh, wait, but he had some of my favorite jokes. Is he going to be like the evil jokester now? And now he's reunited with Chris Vail. So how is the Abbott and Costello dynamic going to play out from here forward?
It seems like they're good as always. Like they're just pretending that nothing happened. Like we're buddies, we're cracking jokes, we're going treasure hunting in the desert. Don't worry, I'm only an evil demon monster. Like I won't eat you as long as you don't make me mad. It seems to be the vibe.
Yeah, they rushed this a lot. We spent way too much time at the beginning. So when we got to this point, it's not super clear that he even understands what he's doing. Like when he stabs himself, does he understand that he's taking that god in? We don't get any of that. There's no moment where he's trying to like anxiously decide. He's just staring at her, and then Aminette gives him the you can bring her back, basically, if you're the god of death. And he's like, oh shit, you're right, but I have to do it for me. So I didn't get the sense that he understood exactly what he was imbibing or what he'd be able to do with that. And then we get this moment at the very end where he's like in the shadows, kind of like, what's the famous vampire movie he did?
Interview with a Vampire?
Interview with the Vampire. Why couldn't I come up with that? Where he's like in the shadows and he's like, don't look at me, I'm evil now. And it's like, you get no sense that he is at all.
Also, he looks the same.
Looks the same. What are you doing? He's like afraid he's going to hurt her, but it's like,
a lot of that I think is left out. I take your point. That's a fun part, and I would love to see more on screen, but they were definitely like, save it for the sequel. You know, we're setting up a cliffhanger here with something juicy, and you don't get to see him. They kind of
hanging from that cliff.
He's in the shadows. I don't know if you do see his face, because he's in the shadows for the rest of the tomb scene where he talks to Jenny, and then he's got a scarf wrapped around his face when he's in the Sahara, doesn't he?
Yeah, you get glimpses of parts of his face, but you never see him fully.
But Aminette had the eyes. That's how you see it. And like when he looks almost directly in the camera in the Sahara, no, they're not there. He's just like a regular Tom Cruise.
They go back, but they did split. There's one close-up scene right when he stabs himself where his split too. So maybe I feel like his curse is episodic, like Jekyll and Hyde, where like sometimes he's a cool dude to hang out with, and sometimes you want to avoid him for the night.
But also we know that Aminette as the mummy, once she's back to her full strength, she doesn't really look like a monster. She looks like she looked like when she was a person. Just the eyes are the giveaway.
But the face tattoos are also, that was part of the curse, right? Those formed on her body when she first struck the pact.
But I guess if you had face tattoos, you wouldn't necessarily be like, don't look at me.
Maybe,
like,
but yeah, maybe Tom Cruise feels differently about face tattoos.
Like, oh, it's cool. Are you going to get a job as like a line cook? That's the vibe you're going for?
My career. That's what he's freaking out about in the shadows.
How will I go to job interviews?
I would.
Well, I think I need to do a little penance here in the third act, because I keep interjecting and going, isn't Tom Cruise so funny? He's got the best lines. They're so great. And I loved him so much. And then he's like, okay, Ian, I can do no wrong. And he delivers the single worst line of the movie when in the standoff face to face with Aminette in the chamber. She's like, yield to me. You are my chosen one. And he has this line. I'm cringing even to read it. I wrote it down. He goes, I'm sorry. We're just never going to happen. And it's not me. It's you. He does two fucking punchlines. Like, not only did he do a terrible punchline in the climax of the movie, every junior comedian knows two punchlines are always worse than one. You got to pick the one joke and go with the one joke. And they just fucked us up royally.
Yeah.
It was pretty brutal.
Yeah, not a good line. Not my favorite part of the movie. I hope they learned their lesson.
They did.
But see, I feel like, not to keep belaboring this point, but if you have an actor like Jake Johnson deliver that awkward yelling from kind of a distance in a very Nick from New Girl way, it lands. You could make it work.
Yeah.
You can't make it work the way he delivered it, which was supposed to be this like very, I'm the hero and this is my big sign off.
No, you're absolutely right.
Not the movie's finest moment. But actually, I do want to talk about the movie's finest moment.
Okay.
The best thing they did and the thing I appreciate more than anything. No post-credit scene.
Yeah. Surprising for a universe starter.
They let us off the hook.
Like, I was sure, like, they know how it works. You got to tease. But I guess maybe they felt they had set up enough of it in the text itself.
Yeah, because they had already cast Johnny Depp as the Invisible Man, I think. Javier Bardem was cast as Frankenstein's monster, and they had Luke Evans as Dracula already. So, like, they had people they could have Nick Fury'd in there at the end to be like, I'm putting together a universe or whatever. But they showed some restraint.
Imagine the post-credit scene where they're like, we've got to introduce the Invisible Man, and it's just an empty room.
That would have.
But I think the scene in the desert should have been a post-credit scene. They could have ended it with his spooky shit in the cavern. She goes back out to her life. They solve it. And then the end is them being like, I thought you liked adventure, or whatever the fuck he says. That would have been good. You find out last minute that he's going to be this monster versus monsters, and that he brought his buddy back, and they're doing a buddy comedy in the middle of the desert for some reason. That would have perfectly been a great post-credit scene, but they fumbled it.
And he could have been like, I've been hearing some rumors about a creature in a black lagoon. Let's go check it out.
Then Michael Keaton
Right?
as Vulture shows up.
Yeah.
Thinking some guys like us should team up, could do some good. Fascinating.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's a Morbius reference.
That's beautiful that you remembered that whole scene.
I wish I couldn't see it in my sleep. It's one of the worst scenes I've ever
But
seen.
then we'd even get that like Russell Crowe voiceover where he's like, we need a monster to fight a different monster. And then you have that ominous
Hero
foreshadow
Egypt
shit.
needs.
Yeah, that was a terrible line too.
He's doing the Commissioner
Yeah.
Gordon at the end of the Dark Knight thing. Like, he's not the
Right.
monster we need, but the one we deserve, or whatever. Yeah. Do you guys want to hear what happened to the people involved after this?
Yeah,
I do.
Sure.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. All right. Let's catch you up. Alex Kurtzman, the director of this movie. This was only his second directorial effort, as I mentioned, but he's quite a prolific screenwriter. He's written things like The Island, The Legend of Zorro, Mission Impossible 3, Transformers, Watchmen, Star Trek, Transformers Revenge of the Fallen, Cowboys and Aliens, Star Trek Into Darkness, The
Oh.
Amazing Spider-Man 2. Yeah, some of the stuff we've talked about.
Yeah, that's
he's-
a pretty interesting resume there.
And he's done a lot of TV directing, so it's not like he's never been behind the camera before, but he's done Fringe, Hawaii Five-0, Lock and Key, Sleepy Hollow. Oh, so I guess him and Len Weissman reunited
yeah, each
on
other,
Sleepy
yeah.
Hollow. Did anyone watch Sleepy Hollow here? Nash, did you watch
No.
it?
No.
It was pretty rad at first, but I think it got silly at the end.
Okay.
And then David Koepp wrote it. He's written a bazillion things, but most notably Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny, the new Jurassic World movie that I think is going to star Scarlett Johansson, if the rumors are to be believed. Spider-Man, War of the Worlds, which I still maintain the first 2/3 of that movie is a masterpiece. Angels and Demons and Inferno, so he loves putting Tom Hanks in shitty wigs, and I can appreciate that. The Lost World, Mission Impossible, the original Jurassic Park, Chris McQuarrie. He directed The Way of the Gun, which is actually going to be a pretty soon episode of the show
Oh, cool.
with Ryan Phillippe. He directed Jack Reacher, Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, Mission Impossible Fallout, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning, and whatever the next one is called.
Right.
Also wrote The Usual Suspects, Valkyrie, The Tourist, Jack the Giant Slayer. He's basically a Tom Cruise guy. He seems to
Yeah.
work primarily with Tom Cruise.
Some good work in
and
there.
Yeah, some bad work too. He worked on Batman and Robin. He worked on The Wolverine, not good.
Okay.
But he's also an EP on Reacher.
Oh, neat.
Yeah. Tom Cruise was in a bit of a career slump when this movie came out. So of his 9 previous movies to this one, only 3 were considered financially successful. The first Jack Reacher, Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol, and Mission Impossible Rogue Nation. Jack Reacher, Never Go Back, Edge of Tomorrow, Oblivion, Rock of Ages, Night and Day, and Valkyrie were all considered disappointments. Some of them were considered downright bombs. Rock of Ages is a huge bomb, but I don't want to cover it because I hate musicals,
Okay.
clearly. We've done 2 of them, and that's too many. And then American Made came in 2017. That's where he played Barry Seal, the pilot who ran drugs for Pablo Escobar
Oh, right.
throughout the 70s and 80s.
I forgot that existed.
It wasn't bad. He's not, if you know anything about Barry Seal, though, he's miscast, but it was fun. And it was like a small movie for Tom Cruise, which I appreciated. It wasn't like he wasn't trying
Yeah.
to start a franchise or make a blockbuster. He was telling a standalone movie with a $40 million budget, which was
Yeah.
quaint.
Interesting choice. Yeah.
So American Made was a minor hit. And then Mission Impossible Fallout and Top Gun Maverick came next, which obviously turned his career around. But the most recent Mission Impossible film, Dead Reckoning, it's considered a bomb, but it went way over budget due to shooting delays caused by COVID. And it
Right.
still made $600 million. But it was so expensive and there were so many delays and insurance problems and all this shit. So who knows if that's any kind of commentary on the staying power of Cruise as a leading man or that franchise. It just seems to be a situation. We'll wait and see thing.
Wasn't it also clobbered by Barbenheimer? Didn't it go head to head in the summer where it like didn't realize there was going to be another behemoth?
Yeah, you wouldn't think a movie like Oppenheimer would be a rival for a Mission
Right.
Impossible movie because one's kind of a quiet, contemplative drama about man's capacity for destruction. The other's Oppenheimer. No, classic zinger.
You got me.
Strung you along so good. Yeah, no, I think you're right. I do think it came out in close proximity to those two and maybe was a disappointment because of it. Annabelle Wallis, our homie from Malignant.
Yeah.
Love her. She was also in Jericho, which is a show I've talked about on this podcast many times.
Oh, okay.
She was only in one episode, but still, I think she was probably a teenager at the time. But she's been in, if we want to talk about her more, she was in King Arthur, Legend of the Sword. We can always cover that one. Huge bomb.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, and it's a historical fiction movie, so we can bring Nash back on to tell us everything they fucked up.
Arthurian bullshit.
And I will.
Yeah. You know anything about Arthurian myths?
I'm so unfun. I do, actually, of course.
It's not, hey, being right is not unfun, okay?
I don't get to go anywhere. Like I'm at home on a Friday.
But that's why we're able to do this.
Works out for us. Nice.
She was in Tag. I forgot. So she's been acted with Jake Johnson before.
Oh, okay.
Boss Level, Silent Night. Sofia Boutella, she followed this up with Atomic Blonde, which is kind of underrated. Hotel Artemis, stay tuned for that one, coming soon. And Prisoners of the Ghostland, which I have not seen. That's a Nick Cage one that's apparently
really?
batshit crazy.
Okay.
And she's currently the star of the god-awful Rebel Moon movies. There's another one coming later this year, I think.
Ooh.
Oh, I feel bad for her for that.
She hitched her carriage to the wrong horse with Snyder. But, I mean, I'm sure she's getting paid handsomely for it, so who are
The
we?
Snyder horse. I wouldn't want to be behind him right now.
Release the Snyder horse.
It's a good image.
Giddy up, Snyder horse. Pick up your feet. Sorry, I'm in a silly mood because I haven't had any caffeine today. And then Jake Johnson. I was trying to think of a funny play on words, but I have none. He's bae. We love Jake Johnson. Self-Reliance was really fun. Ride the Eagle, I really enjoyed. He's great as Peter Parker in the Spider-Verse movies. He was great in Win It All. His show on HBO Max, Minx, is a masterpiece, but it's done now. So if you want like a nice, I think maybe they got 3 seasons. And he was in a little show with Kobe Smulders called Stumptown, and it was a show that was on TV. And
okay.
It had sets and actors and scenes, probably writers.
And you can watch it.
Yeah, and you can watch it if you want to. It was fine. And then, of course, if you've never seen New Girl and you like Jake Johnson, that's just many tens of hours of unbeatable fun. That show is very underrated. If you were put off by like the adorkable whole marketing campaign, I would say give it a chance. It is much more of an ensemble piece than they sold it as. Lamorne Morris, Max Greenfield, Zooey Deschanel, of course, and Jake Johnson all put in great performances. Very much worth your time.
You convinced me to get over my aversion to it with that same argument years ago, and I was so glad I did because it's great.
It's very much a comfort show for me that if I don't know what to watch, I'll just put on a couple episodes and zone out.
Yeah, you really have to power through the first, I think, 5 because of Zooey Deschanel's. They really thought it was going to be about her at first. But
it's me, Zoe. Oh, she has a female Kermit the Frog voice affectation at times. It's me, Zoe.
That's a good way to say it.
Nash, what do you want to plug for us? Why don't you tell us where we can? We told them at the beginning, but maybe people skipped that.
Yeah.
Tell them again. Where can they find you?
Death and Friends. I don't do a lot of stand-up anymore, so Death and Friends is my one true home right now.
Nice.
We should start calling podcasting sit-down comedy.
We should. Although at the beginning of Zoom, we were also doing sit-down comedy.
That's true. Yeah, Cabin Fever shows. I was in the audience for a few of those. I remember those were fun.
Me too.
Everybody was online all the time.
Yeah, that was a bright spot.
So different from now. I'm still online all the time. But that's because I have hyperfixation issues. Yay! All right. Thank you guys so much for listening. Go follow Nash. Is it still at It's Nash Flynn?
It sure is.
On Twitter. We're never calling it X. We refuse.
No, we're not doing that.
Follow the Death and Friends Instagram. You might see some hilarious memes curated by your boy.
So good. Our memes are curated by the most special meme person to ever exist.
The most special boy.
We are honored to have him.
God's own chosen boy.
This unnamed meme person.
And you can follow the Blast Zone Twitter account at Blast Zone Pod. Shoot us an email if you have any movie suggestions, feedback, just want to chat.
Yeah.
BlastZonePod@gmail.com. We love getting emails from the listeners.
We do.
And we'll see you guys next time in the Blast Zone.
See you next time in the Blast Zone.
Blast Zone.